Hello, Saginaw. Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking to someone who actually made it work, selling creative stuff online. Alan Mueller runs Happy Place Signs, a top Etsy shop making custom home decor that people love. He took a simple idea and turned it into a real business. Let's find out how he did that. Alan Mueller, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy that I'm speaking to Saginaw. I'm not from Michigan, but I have deep Michigan roots. I actually honeymooned in Michigan almost 30 years ago. Some in Western Michigan, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo area, some up at Higgins Lake, and so yeah. So hello, Saginaw.
Fantastic. That's great. Saginaw is a great place, and Michigan is a beautiful state.
Oh, I miss
All right.
Michigan in the summer is amazing. Yeah.
It's very hot right now. We have 100-degree weather and very humid, so it's kind of miserable until the
I
next rain, but we're hanging in there.
There you go.
Hey,
There you go.
hey, before we jump into your story, a quick shout out to the folks who help keep this podcast alive. This episode is brought to you by B&H Renovations right here in Saginaw. They handle foundation repairs and waterproofing basements and crawl spaces. I waterproofed my basement and I highly recommend it. With over 23 years of experience, these guys know exactly what they're doing. They will give you a free quote, and if you mention this show, you'll get 10% off. Call B&H Renovations at 517-525-1584 and tell them I sent you. All right, we are back with Alan. Alan, take us back to the beginning. Was this a hobby at first, or did you start this with a business in mind?
So yeah, my son and I, we made these little arrows for our backyard. We're big Disney fans. We love going to Disney World, and we used a stain marker that we got from our local hardware store, and we sort of simulated the Disney font and Google mapped how many miles it was from our home to Disney World, and made a little sign for the backyard. We have a nice backyard with like a pool and a gazebo, and it pointed. We put it on a stick. This many miles to Disney World, this many miles to Disneyland, and this many miles to like the Disney cruise. And it was cute. And then I thought, I wonder if other people would like this. And so I started by thinking, how could I do it in a way that wasn't very time intensive, right? Where if each time I had to do it by hand, it would be very time intensive. So I started by using transparent transfers. I don't know if some people listening might be old enough to remember overhead projectors in elementary school and middle school. Yep. So if you know that
Mhm.
transparent film, what I did was I found film that was printable and I printed like letters and numbers or whatever to make them and then glued them to these little wooden arrows and then started selling those. And that was pretty good. And that's how the business started. And then pretty quickly after that, it evolved into laser etching. And so I have multiple lasers. If your audience is familiar with a CNC machine or just anything that kind of like an inkjet printer almost, it goes back and forth and whatever. Same principle, just with a laser where it's lasering wood. And so I can cut wood or etch into the wood. And so I literally make signs for all kinds of destinies. It started with the arrows. Where's your happy place, right? So it was Cancun, it was Atlanta, it was Italy, it was Paris, it was Disney World, it was wherever someone's happy place was. And then I started making frames and keychains and oh my gosh, lanterns and all kinds of things. So the room behind me it used to be a dining room and now it's just a shop. It's I've industrial lasers and little wooden pieces as far as the eye can see. And so now it's turned into a full-on business. Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. I just now made the connection. Happy place. You mean the happiest place on earth. I did
I
not realize that.
I mean, I wasn't thinking that specifically. I was just thinking that's my happy place, right? For
That's
me, it
your happy
is,
place.
but
Right.
everyone has a happy place. One of the funniest ones. My son is a big fan of the Lord of the Rings, and I like the movies, the Lord of the Rings. I think they're really great. And somebody ordered signs to Mordor and the Shire, which are these fictitious locations from Lord of the Rings. And I wrote to the customer. I said, "I'm happy to make this sign, but when I type Mordor into Google Maps, nothing shows up." And so, I've had some very fascinating destinations that people have chosen. So my happy place happens to be Disney, but lots of people have lots of happy places. That's
Yeah.
all over the place. As a matter of fact, I was just looking on the map because I had forgotten where Saginaw is, and on my honeymoon, I went to Frankenmuth, which is just down the road
Oh,
from you. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So it's all about people's happy places. But now one of my most popular items is I do these digital countdowns, and so it's about 4x6. It's got a digital countdown, and it's a countdown to your retirement. It's a countdown to your wedding. It's a countdown to someone getting their doctorate degree. It's a countdown to a quinceanera. It's a countdown to a bar mitzvah. It's a countdown to whatever people are wanting to count down to. And I did not realize when I just made one of those on a whim. I never knew. I did not realize how much those would take off. That might be half my business now. People counting
Wow.
down to
Yeah.
something. And then I have frames. And so if you think about it, the countdown is counting down to an event, and then the frame is a perfect thing. Oh, at the event, I took this picture, and here's the frame. So it's sort of
Yeah.
I get to meet people's needs on the way to something that they're excited about, and then after there's something excited about, or in the case of the arrows, pointing to somewhere they're excited to go.
That is awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome. The last time I counted down to something was as a child for Christmas. I would be, oh, 3 more days to Christmas. Yeah.
I have Christmas. I also have a bunch of sort of football inspired ones. I can't get away with saying the Detroit Lions, right? But I can say countdown to Lions football, right? And so because Lions, that could be your local high school, that could be anybody. And so I've got some very common mascots, and so some people are wanting to count down to football season. But yeah, counting down to Christmas. I have some people counting down to Halloween. I have people counting down to all kinds of things, and so yeah, it's a cool thing.
If you were able to get the permission from the Detroit Lions, you would be able to make it would be a popular item.
Well, so I mean, with copyright things, there's licensing, and so you have to get licenses for things. And so I do original designs. My designs use fonts and use sort of generic wording to just steer clear of that because it's better to steer clear.
Yeah.
One time I put something up, a customer had asked me to make something, and they sent me a picture, and I used the picture. And then after I made the thing for them, I put it up on my shop, and then I got an email from Etsy saying, "Yeah, this is an official image." Blah blah blah. So I steer clear of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the most litigious companies in the world is Disneyland, right?
Sure, sure. But again, I'm doing like, I've been to Disney enough that I can say, okay, there's this hotel called the Port Orleans. And I can go, okay, I've stayed at that hotel. What's the vibe? What are they? And so one of the things about Disney that's interesting is everything, whether it's a park, whether it's a hotel, they're trying to tell a story. And stories use imagery, stories use abstract concepts. So for me, I'm not, I just go, well, what's the story they're trying to convey at Port Orleans? Oh, it's New Orleans. So I'm like, what are some symbols about New Orleans that I can incorporate? Does that make sense? So in other words, I'm just doing a lot of my own logos that are inspired by these locations. Yeah.
Wow. Do you sell any of these Disneyland themed products in the gift shops? There's like 100 gift shops in the park, right?
Oh, no, 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 no. So I'm just
You're
online.
not
Yeah, yeah.
not al-
No, no,
not a-
no.
no.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
That's not good. I assumed it because I saw the Disneyland that you would be selling them in the park, but no. Oh,
No, so
they
no,
don't. No.
no. Yeah.
Copyright is tricky. It really is
It
because
is.
you're allowed to use the word Disneyland, but you're not allowed to use Mickey Mouse image, right?
Things like that, exactly. And so you find where the copyright stuff is, and then you just kind of steer clear of those things. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
makes sense because
yeah.
after the um, after the licensing and everything, there's not really much profit after that, huh?
Yeah, so like for example, fraternities and sororities, same thing, right? And so I don't know if you've heard of the Divine Nine, but the Divine Nine is the nine historically black fraternities and sororities. And and they are very serious about their copyright things. And so, you just got to steer clear of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my favorite product on your site was the custom logo and the QR code. Those are,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen those types of things in restaurants and small business. Yeah, like that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
that a hot seller?
Yeah, and so realtors or oh my gosh, anybody with a business can get these. And on my phone, and I would show you, except I'm using it to talk to you. I made my own phone case, and it's available on the shop too. And you can, if you have a small business, and for me, I have two businesses. And the businesses are not at all like each other. One is this Etsy shop and the laser etching. The other is a consulting business. And so
Oh,
frequently, when someone would ask me if I had a card, either I wouldn't have a card or I'd have the wrong one, right? I'd have some client saying, "Hey, we want you to come do leadership development." I'm like, "I've got my Etsy shop card," right? I have the wrong card with me. And so I got a link tree. A lot of folks are familiar with link tree. And I have a QR code on the back of my phone that goes to my link tree. And so no matter what someone's looking for from me, they can scan the back of my phone, which I always have with me,
yeah.
and it just takes them to my link tree. They can connect with me on LinkedIn or go to my consulting website or go to my Etsy website. And so it's just a very convenient way to get there. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, so one of the most interesting things about you starting your business is, I mean, I feel like a lot of people, especially in Saginaw, they struggle to find work. There's not a lot of great jobs, and
Yeah. Yeah.
finding work is difficult. So, you started this business, and I know a lot of listeners are wondering, man, can I do this? What
Yeah.
would you say to them?
I would say to them that starting a business, it takes work. But I'll also say and I do a lot of this when I'm doing my consulting world. I do a lot of talk about people's personalities, and your listeners know, without getting too technical, your listeners know that there are some people whose personalities are about kind of following the rules and paying attention and policy and etc. And then there's some people whose personality is more about dreaming, being dreamers, and thinking in the what if space. And so if if you're a what if person, you're going to have a better chance starting something. Because I don't know, some of your listeners may be old enough to remember the old commercial where Reese's peanut butter cups was introducing themselves, and there's two people walking down the street, and there's like a woman with a chocolate bar and a man with a jar of peanut butter, which I think is hilarious because I've never seen anybody walking down the street with an open jar of peanut butter before. But they bump into each other, and the tagline is, "You got your chocolate in my peanut butter. You got your peanut butter on my chocolate." And then Reese's peanut butter cups existed, right? So for everybody listening, at some point, Reese's peanut butter cups did not exist. At some point, Diet Coke did not exist. At some point, every product you've ever thought of didn't exist. And so right now, Reese's peanut butter cups seems so simple. It's chocolate plus peanut butter, and most people love it, right? It seems simple, but it wasn't simple at some point. So for me, the two or three things that coalesced in my mind were that people love to travel and visit places, that because of my previous career, I have a little bit of design background, so I can design my own sort of logos and font work and stuff to evoke certain things. So it's a little bit of design work, a little bit of the dreaming of people have places they like to go, and then you knowing how to use Google Maps. Not everyone knows how to use Google Maps well. Not everybody knows how to design well. And then learning to run a laser was another skill set I had to build. But you put those three things together and you get this business where somebody hasn't thought of it yet. And so I think when starting a small business, a couple things to think about. One is there something somebody hasn't thought about yet? Another thing is, can you find things that are not super labor intensive? My wife has an Etsy shop, but her shop is more labor intensive. Each piece she has to do one at a time by hand. I design something in 5 minutes on the computer, send it to the laser, and I can make 20 of it while I'm watching television, right? Or 20 of it while I'm going on a walk, right? And so thinking about, is there something that doesn't exist yet? Is there something that's not going to be too labor intensive or cost too much to get started? And when I started, like I said, I used a plastic film through a regular printer. I had a printer. So I just had to find that film that worked with that. That's how I didn't need to buy a laser at the beginning. Then as business grew, I wanted to make a better product, and so I switched. Then I was able to afford a laser, and the rest is sort of history. Yeah,
Hey, I like what you said about it. It's a special person who is the small business owner, starts a small. It's not the same as the guy who goes to the corporation and works because
it's
it's a two
different.
different beasts, you know.
It's different.
Like if I see a person unemployed and I can't find work any, but I'll say, why don't you try? It just doesn't. They they don't want to. They want to work for someone and not. This is just two different people, really.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, and I don't think I told you this in my bio, but I used to be a career counselor. Like that was my job, and so I ran a career center at a small college in North Carolina, and so my job was to help traditional age students, but also we had a lot of adult students, a lot of adult students in their 40s and 50s who were re-careering and coming back to school. And my job was to help them get jobs and get internships and sometimes apply to graduate school or whatever. And it's interesting because in career theory, and I'm going to get nerdy here for just a second, but the grandfather of career counseling was a guy named John Holland, and he said that there are six kinds of workers, six kinds of jobs. One is working with your hands. One of them is investigating work, which is like I work in a lab or I'm a detective. One is artistic work. One is social kind of work, teaching, counseling. One is entrepreneurial work, and then one is sort of office work. So these are the six types, right? And so most of us are more than one type. And so the people who have entrepreneurship and artistic together, which happens to be me, those folks usually are better, in my experience, on the front end of dreaming up and conceiving the business, and not always as good with the details when it comes to running the business. So that's the flip side of it, right? If we have different types, y'all know this, right? There are people who are more artsy and more business oriented, right? And so to run a business, you either have to have a good partner, right? So like if you're artsy, have someone who's very technical, or if you're technical, have someone who's artsy, right? You see this all the time. I mean, the founding of Apple computers, was the brainy, nerdy, square edges one, and then the dreamer, right? So when Disney started, it was Walt Disney was the dreamer, and his brother Roy Disney was the numbers guy, right? And so anyway, there are certain types, and this is why some small businesses don't make it, I think, because either you have really good business management skills that you've developed over time, maybe through the working world, through watching other managers, or you're more artistic and creative and in the what if I created this, what if I tried this, what if I tried this, and not a lot of people overlap in those when it comes to some of these personality type quizzes. And I'm very lucky because I'm much more artistic in my deep down in my bones. I'm much more entrepreneurial deep down in my bones. But I was a banker in my previous life, and then I was a university administrator where I'm working with, law and policy and all of these things. And I've sharpened the part of my brain enough to do the business part, and I'm not as good at that part. The all the paperwork and stuff, that part doesn't excite me, but I've learned enough that I can kind of trudge through it when I have to.
Yeah, I'm not excited about the mundane stuff that
No.
keeps the business alive, but I find myself, I'm still an idea person. I, even though I'm, I think I'm your age, we are, this is our career. We're too old to jump into a new career, but I still see other ones. I go, that would be a good career. I wish I could have, but I'm too,
Well,
age stopped me.
can I challenge you on something? Because I
What's
think
that?
age is just a number. I mean, it's so like for example, I started this Etsy shop. I guess I gotta look at my plaque. 2016. So I guess 9 years ago, I was 41. I was 41. I already had three graduate degrees in my field, right? My former profession. And, it wasn't really too late. And so one of the things too is, I think that your listeners, one of the things that I love is the both and philosophy. A lot of people think, oh, I have to pick a career. And I'm like, well, sure, you got to pay the bills, but you could always have a side hustle. You could always try something on the side and see if it's interesting. So I have two businesses, and then part time I'm also a travel agent, and that's just a part time thing I do for fun.
Yeah.
And um, but like So I definitely think that as we get older, we do sometimes get set in our ways, but I think we can also shake that up. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. And this is the generation of the side hustle because
Yeah.
things cost so much and a lot of people are working two jobs and if they're not, they're struggling. So the side
It's,
hustle
yeah.
makes a lot of great sense. I know a guy in my area, he makes these cedar fence panels that are
Yeah.
really nice. So he has a normal job, but when he's, oh, it's my day off, or I'm, and he just whips out a few of these, sells them on Marketplace. So he goes at his pace, and there's a lot of products like that, like
Yeah.
people making chicken coops or other small wooded raised garden beds,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so I really think it's awesome to do the side hustle.
It is.
And you know,
But
yeah,
like you said, and it's funny. I used to do improv comedy at a comedy club here in North Carolina, and one of my troop mates, a guy named Rankin, I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go sit on a panel next week about side hustles because I've got so many side hustles." And a friend of mine invited me to a panel at her college, and he said to me, he goes, "Side hustle. What a cutesy way to talk about having to have a second job to survive in this economy." And I thought, man, that's hilarious. What a cutesy way to talk about having to have a second job just to kind of make ends meet. And so I have a love hate relationship with the side hustle. I wish that there were enough really good paying jobs that we didn't all, that side hustles weren't so appealing. And in the system as it is, side hustles, and it's funny because my side hustle has played two roles in my life. The first role was when my kids were still in middle school, high school, was extra money for vacations. Now
yeah.
it's, can I get my kid through college? Right. So the side hustle went from extra money to money we need and need more of. So if any of your listeners feel like shopping on my shop, shameless plug, they can check it out sometime. Yeah, help my kid
Well,
through college.
well, you brought up a good point. Is if your kid is not in college, um, it's very difficult for a minor to find work, but
Yeah, yeah.
they could do a side hustle. I think that a clever teenager would make some craft project. And do you think that's possible, or is it too complicated
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think that a lot would depend on the person, right?
on the person?
Yeah. And so, like, I studied a lot of developmental psychology, and I can tell you that there are 16-year-olds who I would not trust to, hold my soda. And then there are 16-year-olds who I would trust to run the government, right? So that's a pretty wide range, right? And so I think that when it comes to younger entrepreneurs, the ones that have kind of a more mature outlook on things, yeah, and I've seen some of these before too. Some students who go to these science camps and they're working on inventions and getting patents and these kinds of things, and that blows me away. That it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I really kind of caught the entrepreneurship bug, but some of them are doing these entrepreneurial thinking things at a much younger age, Yeah.
It is amazing. And I would love to see, I agree with you. I would love to see more opportunities for teenagers to find work and raise the wages for the lowest
Yeah.
because
Yeah. It's time. It's way
working your
past time.
butt off, yeah, working your butt off and then still not making, yeah,
When
that's,
I was in college, I think minimum wage was $4.25, and the restaurant where I worked, you could get a meal for $2.99, the daily special for $2.99, and it was much better than a fast food place. I mean, it was like a little cafe, and $2.99 would get you a burger, fries, and a drink, or a chicken sandwich, salad and a
yeah,
drink, or whatever, for two
yeah,
dollars and 99 cents, which was 3/4 of the minimum wage, right?
yeah,
And that ratio has been skewed, right? It's a little harder these days. Yeah. So
yeah, for
yeah,
sure, for sure. Um, the reviews of your Etsy shop, they say a lot of good things about you. They say you
yeah,
have great customer service and great care for the customer. And
yeah.
so, how do you approach customer service?
So one of the things, some people have heard the phrase "the customer's always right." Well, we know that not all customers are always right, but I think what I would say is customers want to be treated fairly, and so that's the way I would place it: is they want to be treated fairly. And so if they ordered a custom project from me and they spelled the name a certain way and I misspelled it and sent it to them, and I realized I messed up, and they said you messed up, I'm like, no problem, I'm going to send you a replacement right now. So I don't hesitate, I don't quabble. If they made a mistake, right? If they typed it in wrong, then I could kind of say, well, no, I'm sorry, you did, it was your mistake, etc. Instead, I say, look, I've made mistakes. I know how it goes. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a replacement. I would just ask you to pay me just for my materials and shipping. So oftentimes it's an item that they spent $45 on or $65 on. And then I say to them, my materials plus shipping is going to be $12.50. So I'll give you one at cost for a replacement. And do I have to do that? No, but I want to get it right. I want to get it right. And if they made a mistake, I got to show some grace. I mean, we've all made mistakes, right? And so I try to just make sure that the customer feels understood, feels appreciated, and feels that they're being treated fairly. And so that way, that's instead of the customer's always right, which is kind of a little disingenuous. I just say that customers want to be treated fairly, and if you treat them fairly, you'll get good ratings. And I'm very fortunate because also I make a high quality product, and so that's the other thing. And early on, I'll be honest, early on when I was using that plastic cover, the products were not up to my standards. Like I started this because it's the only thing I knew. I didn't know laser machines even existed, right?
Right.
I did it that way, but I was always a little dissatisfied with the product. And my customers still loved it because again, they knew nothing different too. Like they saw the product online and they would buy it. I still have good reviews from that era as well. But these reviews from kind of my modern era, those are ones that I'm very proud of because it's overwhelmingly, and the testimonials and the reviews that I love the most are when a customer says something went wrong, but they took care of it, or it got lost in the mail, but they took care of it. And if it gets lost in the mail, I make the same deal to the customer. I'm like, hey, it got lost in the mail. I can give you one more or less just for whatever it costs me to make and get it to you. I'm not going to profit off of the post office messing up. And thankfully, that
Right.
does not happen much.
Right.
But when it does, I just try to make it right, because when the
Right.
post office messes up, it's not the customer's fault and it's not my fault. It's neither of our faults. So how can
Right.
we find something where they feel like I'm treating them fairly
Yeah.
and where I'm not trying to profit gouge them off of some mistakes someone else made that's beyond their control, you know? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That's a great way to handle customer service.
Yeah.
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 So, what does a typical day in your shop look like? Are you handling production, shipping, and orders all yourself?
So sort of. It's sort of expanded as it's gone. And so I started with two small lasers. And then as the business grew, those lasers, they were called glow forges. A lot of people can get them at like Joann's Fabrics or Michael's, like a craft store, Hobby Lobby, maybe something like that. Um, and those were great starters. But then as my business grew, I needed to get bigger lasers. So what I did is I took my old ones and gave them to two friends of mine. And I just said, this laser is yours, but you're going to pay me back in laser time. You're going to pay me back in laser hours. And so when the holiday rush is happening, I might call you and say, Scott, can I have 10 of this piece? Jason, can I have 15 of this piece? And they laser them for me. So now I have four lasers, two in my home
Yeah.
and two with my laser partners. So
Wow.
in some ways, we operate like a co-op, I guess is the closest business model to it. So I have an LLC, but we operate like a co-op because I gave them lasers. Like I just gave them to them. And they pay me back in helping me with excess, around the holiday season.
Wow.
But a typical week, the thing that's great is I may only spend an average week, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a week in an average week.
Really?
But
Wow.
here's the caveat. From about October 1st through December 15th, it's like a
Right.
25 to 30 hour a week job because the holiday
Yeah.
season is huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
And so that I typically from October 15th to December 15th in those 60 days make as much as I've made all the rest of the year combined. So
Wow.
it's and I do have people who help me pack up signs and people who've helped me sand and cut wood and just friends
Right.
and neighbors and yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's I when I saw your work, I assumed that it was more than one person was doing all the work. It's a
I,
lot of work.
well, I'm the main person. I mean, like, so it's,
Yeah.
and again, the packing, I mean, a lot of times it's me and my wife, right? Or me and my kids. And then, every once in a while I have like someone in the neighborhood, that I know that like will come over and help me, pack things up. Or my friend that was one of the lasers, he'll come cut pieces for me or whatever if I need wood cut. But I do, I mean, 90% of it goes through me. So
Wow.
I just kind of reach out for help here and there as I need it. Yeah.
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 Cool. It's fun working with wood, huh?
I mean, it can be that when the lasers break down, that's not fun.
That's
Um,
not fun.
but I got to tell you, you're not going to find, I have learned more about lasers and how they work, and I've replaced all the pieces on my laser.
Yeah.
And so like, and earlier, something you said about sort of being too old to switch. Sometimes when the laser would break down, I would get really stressed and I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. This is the end of my business. And then I'm like, wait a second, wait a second. I learned all through middle school. I learned all through high school. I learned through college several times. I went to college. And I'm like, I don't have to give up on the idea that I can still learn something new. I know I can learn something new. It seems scarier. It seems more daunting. But if I really get to it, I can learn it. I can look up YouTube videos. I can call the company that made the laser. They have great customer support, by the way. The people I bought my laser from, amazing
Yeah.
customer support.
Yeah.
And they've talked me through, oh, to replace this component, you need to do this. And I've replaced and I've learned I could almost rebuild each of my lasers from scratch. That
Yeah.
as much as I've had to replace over the years. And so for someone who's not engineering minded, and for someone who's not, I'm not the type that reads the instruction book when putting together my furniture from Target or Walmart, right? I just look at the pieces usually, right? You got the different
Yeah.
personality types. And so for someone like me to have challenged myself to learn this technical thing that I had no understanding of, but I'm like, if someone can learn it, I can learn it too. And
Yeah.
so, but the working with, I like the designing on the computer and then just sending it to the laser. So, I get to the creative part is I'm like, especially with the things around a Disney park. Again, I can't just go, oh, take their logo and use it because they own the logo. But like, I can be like, what does that ride or what does that snack evoke to me? And what font do I have that looks like that? And what kind of clip art can I get that's generic that fits the theme, and can I dress it up in a way that makes it that will evoke that for the person who's thinking about that destination, right? And
Yeah.
so I like the design part, and then I love being able to send it to a laser and make 20 of something or whatever. Yeah,
That's awesome. That is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Um, how do you decide on a price for each product?
Oh my gosh, that I wish I had a good answer. I mean, you obviously have to take into account your materials cost and then shipping. And one thing I learned early on, and it's changed a little bit, but I use the U.S. Post Office because I'm a firm believer in using the post office. And things under a pound are being sort of shipped by the ounce, and things over a pound are sort of in a new category. That's changed a little bit in the last 2 years. But in general, as I was even developing my products, like my arrows, I figured out that 4 arrows weighed 14 ounces. So as soon as you get from 14 ounces to 16 ounces, which is a pound, it's like $2.50 more in shipping. And so the difference between 12 and 14 ounces is nothing. It's 25 cents. But as soon as you hit that 16-ounce threshold, so my products, everything on my shop that I know weighs less than a pound, I can go, okay, that's going to be this much shipping. How much did the product cost? It's this much. And how much do I want to make off of the product, right? The time it takes me, etc. There are items that I make that are not customized that I'll make 50 at a time and have them sit on a shelf that don't require much work. I've already designed it once. I can make 50 of them. I glue them together at 20 minutes or whatever. But for ones that are customized, and customers expect this, for ones that are customized, it costs a little bit more because my time in the designing process. Because again, I've designed lots of designs, but if somebody says countdown to the Williams family vacation, I need to change the template, say Williams family, right? And so it's the how much my materials are plus the shipping are the main two factors, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because in my other business, I have a much harder time figuring out how to charge for
Yeah.
things. It's a harder price thing to negotiate. Yeah,
Do you ever go on Etsy and peek at your competition and see what they're charging and stuff?
I've never done that, which I think I did that once. And it's funny
How,
because before I was doing the arrows, nobody on Etsy was doing the arrows. Like I think the first one. Now you can find a bunch. Most of them are made by crickets and stuff, like where they put the vinyl on the wood. And so I've inspired lots of other folks to start their own, and they'll do it cheaper too. Like they'll because
hey,
yeah.
oh,
No, go
I
ahead.
hate to interrupt you, but I thought since you have some of your designs in the back, could you show us one of your popular ones so the
Sure,
viewers can get an idea of what you make?
sure, 100%. So one of my most popular ones is Countdown
Awesome.
Until Our Magic Vacation.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
it's
I see how
etched.
you, yep,
Yeah,
I see all
and
the
it's
Disney,
yeah, and it's
Epcot.
all things that are sort of like Disney inspired, right? And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of great artists on Etsy, and I've bought several files from them that are things that are not quite exactly the thing, but are like very close, you
Yeah.
know. And
That's what this is.
with characters, apparently silhouettes are kind of okay. Um, but then also like this, I make these frames that I think are very beautiful. Two
Yeah,
like
that is
there's like
beautiful.
birch on top of a stained wood, so it's sort of layered as well, which is
Yeah,
really really
I like
cool.
that. I like that.
Um, and I make these lanterns.
Oh, beautiful. I saw the lantern and that is beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
so
a silhouette does not count as a violation of copyright?
from what I've read,
That's amazing.
a shadow or a silhouette, from
Yeah.
what I've read, is fair game.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Obviously they haven't contacted you, right?
no, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good.
And I know people, some people in Florida that sell things where they are actually kind of flirting with the copyright thing. And I've said to them, I've said, how do you navigate that? And one of them said to me something that kind of stuck with me. And they said the big companies, they just don't want they just don't want to look bad. That that they are, you know, because they're sort of the company I was talking to. They're sort of a mom and pop company, and but I mean, they have a few employees. I mean, like they're like a legit business. And some of the things I look at that, I'm like, isn't that too close to the? Is that too close to the? And they're like, look, one of the things we've learned is that the bigger companies, and I don't know if that one was Disney or who that was, but the bigger companies, they just don't want you to look. They don't want they don't want you to make something that's going to make them look bad, if that makes sense. That and I was
Right.
like, I've never thought of it that way. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's I think people need to be careful.
Well, you,
Yeah.
what is the hardest part about running an Etsy shop?
Um, Goodness. I mean, I think the hardest part recently has been suppliers. And so, you know, y'all remember when the pandemic happened, people talked about supply chain. And in my previous career, I would have had no care in the world about supply chain unless it affected something that I got from my home, you know. But you know, for example, I had a frame that was a frame that I got from a supplier, and it was a great frame. It was high quality. It etched very well, and then they stopped supplying it, and so I had to go find a new supplier for my frames. And it's interesting because the supplier I found was one that was in the U.S. It was in Ohio, but it was just bought like last year by a company in Michigan. And so there, so yeah, so supply chain stuff. My little digital countdowns are made internationally and sent here, right? The frames are made domestically. The wood that I get for my signs sometimes is from Canada, sometimes it's from New Zealand. And so, you know, it's finding where to get the stuff is takes some creativity and some asking around, and yeah,
Yeah, and sometimes the quality can change from a supplier and you're like stuck. You're like, oh man,
it
right?
can. It can. Now I lucked out with the frames. I lucked out because number one, The company in Ohio, I think, was a union company, which I support when I can. And it was made right there in Ohio, like made domestically, and it was a great. It was actually better, really, than the other product. And so, it's kind of, you have to work on that. And then also, one of the things that's interesting about doing a lot of custom pieces is sometimes I'll list something in my shop and I'll say I have 30, but I have 30, like if I have 30 frames, and if I have 10 different listings of 10 different designs to choose from, and each one says I have 30, I don't actually have 30 times 10, I have 30. And so I have to keep track of when I'm running low on certain things to restock across multiple listings for the same kind of piece, right? So if I have 100 arrows that are blank, and if I have 100 different designs of arrows that say they each have 20 in stock,
Right.
do I have that much in stock? No, because each piece is customized, but I have to kind of, yeah. So that part is a little bit interesting, but I just pay attention. I look at Etsy as a platform. I'll just make a little plug. Etsy as a platform is great. It's great because they take care of the VAT tax. So if you sell internationally, they take care of all that, which is amazing because otherwise I would not sell internationally. But my products literally go all over the world. I've
Right.
sell my little countdown. My wedding countdowns are shockingly popular in England. I don't know why, but wedding countdowns are hugely popular in England. But Etsy, if people are thinking about platforms, there's a lot of great platforms out there, Shopify and others. But for me, Etsy, even though the fees are not great, it takes care of so much so that I don't have to worry about it, that it makes it worth it to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and what do you do to drive traffic to the store?
Mm. Facebook groups, and Instagram, and I have my own social media. I've got Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. But also, the universe winked at me a few times because one time, and it's a funny story. I was about to get laid off at my job. I just didn't know it. But about 17 days to the day before I got laid off, I think it was like a Disney inspired thing that saw a couple of my products. It was this unofficial Facebook group that had 1.6 million followers, and they wrote an article about my shop. And in those 17 days, I sold, you know, 3 paychecks worth of signs right before I was getting laid off. And so, God or the universe or whatever makes sense of the world winked at me big time at that moment, right? And there have been a few other things like that too. One time I was teaching a class of grad students, and we were on like a little break. The classes were 3 hours long, so we're on a little break. And one of the students says, "Dr. Mueller, is this your shop on BuzzFeed?" And so BuzzFeed had written an article and featured my shop, and I'm like, "That is my shop on BuzzFeed." And so there have been instances like that where certain partnerships have happened. The last one I'll tell you, and this one blows the first two out of the water. My wife and I took a cruise, and we did a 5K on the island that the cruise stopped at, and we got lost and it was like right when the pandemic was slowing down, and so they didn't have anybody directing traffic, so we got lost. And this dude emerged from the woods on this
Mhm.
island with a shirt that said the 5K. We're like, well, clearly he knows where he's going, and we got to talking, and he had grown up in North Carolina, and he says, "Yeah, I run this shop and we sell sort of Disney inspired things and other things that are sort of Florida related." And I'm like, "I make signs." He was like, "Stop it. I'm looking for someone who makes signs." And on that island in the middle of nowhere. And now he gets me business, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. And that's wholesale. That's not retail. So he'll offer something to his customers. And then, I'll give him a discount price. Um, yeah. And so I have retailers too. Like there's a guy in Ohio, and he ordered this sign with a certain amount of miles. And then a week later, he ordered the same sign with slightly different miles. And I was like, "Are you okay? Like, was the first sign not okay?" He goes, "No, I'm upcharging and selling these on my own website." I'm like, "Cool, great." And so I have retailers now too, which is kind of neat. Yeah.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome. It's great when your business, I don't feel that satisfaction working in a corporation. When the corporation makes $1 billion in the first quarter, I don't feel excited. But when I sell just a few thousand extra this year, oh man, And so there is a greater joy in the
Yeah,
small business and the entrepreneur, the small business person.
yeah.
We feel a pride for our gem of our, you know,
It's huge. It's huge. And but the other thing to me is, I was working a job where I was working 50 hours a week easily, sometimes 60, and it was tiring. It was very tiring, and I wanted better work life balance. I did not think work life balance would be possible, and now my two businesses allow me for a lot of I can when my kid is in a concert, I can see the kid's concert and don't have to juggle my schedule or ask for time off or whatever. Like my schedule is my schedule. Um, and then also, I know we're here to talk about my Etsy shop, but my Etsy shop I mentioned is very busy October through December because of the holidays. My other business is most busy in like January through September. And so it's perfect that each one of these has a busy season that's opposite the other. And that is, again, a wink from the universe, some dumb luck, a little bit of skill and preparation on my part that each of my businesses have an opposite busy season. Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. Yeah,
that's perfect.
yeah,
They complement each other.
they do. They do. Yeah.
All right. So if there is a listener out there who has this creative idea of something they want to make, and what advice do you have for them?
Join some groups on social media. I mean, there are some Etsy seller groups out there if you want to explore that part. I joined a group called Higher Ed Entrepreneurs and Side Hustlers. It was a lot of people who worked in universities or colleges who were thinking more entrepreneurial about side hustles. And in that community, I found so much great advice. I was able to ask questions. And the thing is, too, y'all probably heard the adage, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Well, sort of like the customer's always right. I don't entirely believe that phrase, but I will say be brave and ask questions, even if you're afraid of it sounding stupid, because someone else wants to ask the question too, right? And so there are such things as stupid questions, but most of the questions that we trick ourselves into thinking are stupid are not stupid questions. And so ask questions of people in your community and ask questions of people on an entrepreneurial journey. I cannot tell you how many times I've had cups of coffee, mostly with people earlier in their entrepreneurial journey than me, who are asking me for advice. And I'm happy to share because 10 years ago, I was having coffee with someone who was giving me advice and I need to pay that forward. Yeah.
That's great. That is a great way to mentor the new entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Awesome. Alan, thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, if you want to visit Alan's shop on Etsy, it's Happy Place Signs at Etsy, and you're going to love his products. And thank you so much, Alan. You've given us a lot to think about. And entrepreneur, that's the way to go, especially in this job market of uncertainty. I didn't want to sit in a corporate job wondering if I'm going to be the next person laid off, wondering if a robot's going to replace me next month. I want to be in charge of my own destiny, and
Yeah.
you made that happen. And so I hope this lights a spark in some listeners who are thinking about starting their own business.
Yeah.
And as always, I want to thank the listeners. I'm a new podcast, so I want to ask you, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. And if you have an idea for an upcoming show, make a comment in the comment section and I'm going to read it and try to make that happen for you. Until next time, Saginaw, keep smiling.